everyone, how's it going, and welcome to today's Wild Rift video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at my tier list for patch 3.1. The patch has been out for nearly a week now, and I think now's the best time to kind of take a step back from the gameplay and just have a look at the meta in general and see what picks are really strong and see what picks are really weak. Obviously, this tier list is just my opinion. If you have anything that maybe you think should change or any opinions, I'd love to know them. Let me know down in the comments. And as always, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video for more Wild Rift content. First up, let's take a look at the Baron lane. We don't really have the Queen in the Baron lane anymore with Fiora. She's now been joined by Darius and Camille. Now, even though Darius and Camille are both in the S+ tier, honestly, everyone in the S tier as well can move up into the S+ tier. I think there's a lot of champions at the moment in the Baron lane, especially with the Divine Sunderer changes, the Death Stance changes, have really benefited from them. Fiora still really goes Trinity Force. I've seen people go Divine Sunderer with Grasping Undying, very similar to the Camille build, but I still feel like Trinity Force with Fiora is a lot better. But with, you know, Hullbreaker coming in, the new Death Stance, Fiora is still really strong. Darius still goes kind of the same build. You like to go Black Cleaver, Dead Man's Plate, Death Stance, etc. on top as well, and he's still really strong. Still does really well in the laning phase. Still's a really good team fight Baron lane champion, and is still really good. The same with Camille really as well. Great during the laning phase. With Divine Sunderer now, you can now go Grasping Undying. And that's, you know, combos really well on top of each other. You know, you got the Grasping Undying healing and the stacking health. Then you have Divine Sunderer as well, which is also going to be healing you. And it's just really good against tanks in general that will be building Divine Sunderer. And it's still really good, you know, with Hullbreaker. You can split push really well with Camille. She's very safe to play, really strong during team fights. And that's why she is sitting up in the S+ tier. Renekton sitting down in the S tier. Again, like I said, all these S tier champions could probably move up to S+ tier. Kind of same with like A+ moving up to S. To be honest, it's really hard to do this tier list for this patch, because there are, in my opinion, so many champions that are really strong at the moment. I don't think there's really any real broken champions that have kind of broken the meta. Not yet anyway, unless people figure stuff out in the next couple of days or couple of weeks. Renekton's still really strong. You still go the Blade Rune King Black Cleaver build. Both really strong items, especially with Renekton. Really tanky, does a lot of damage as well. And again, it's just overall great champion. Set, you can go with Divine Sunderer now, or you can go with another option. You can just go for you know, Blade Rune King Black Cleaver if you want more of a damage build. But now people are going Black Cleaver into Divine Sunderer and going more for a tankier build. I've gone for Conqueror as a rune, but you can change this to Grasping Undying again, because it works really well with Divine Sunderer if you want to play a little bit more passive. But I think Set with Conqueror just works really well, because when you're suplexing, when you're punching a lot, you can use that on top of your, you know, Haymaker to just do a lot of damage. Garen, same build as always. Black Cleaver, Dead Man's Plate, very similar to Darius. Still really tanky, still really strong, even though his ultimate did get nerfed and his third ability did get nerfed. Still really easy champion to play, and still is really strong. Riven, again, a few changes with her. You can kind of go for a Divine Sunderer build again with Riven if you really want to. I think Black Cleaver still works really well for her. The new Death Stance also works really well with her. So again, she's benefited a lot from the new items. Irelia, same thing. Divine Sunderer into a lot of attack speed with Wit's End, Bladed Rune King. Works really well with her. And now we got Wukong sitting up in the S tier. Now, I think really Wukong is really strong. Black Cleaver plus Divine Sunderer with Wukong's healing as well from his first ability. I think not only is he a really strong tank, but he also can do a lot of damage at the same time, and he can heal a lot during team fights as well. So you got your second ability for your clone, you got your first ability healing you up a lot, you got your ultimate for all that crowd control, and like I said, I think he's definitely one of the best Baron laners at the moment. Maybe not the best in terms of carry potential compared to the other bruisers. I think if you have other carries on your team, and if you need a sort of tank in a way, then Wukong can be that tank for you. Gragas in the A+ tier, even though this says Grasping Undying, you can go for Electrocute as well and go for a more AP, heavy AP build. But you can go Grasping Undying if you want to go for like an off-tank sort of Gragas build. But still really strong champion overall in the Baron lane. Great during team fights, really sustainable during the laning phase, and it's quite strong. Olaf in the Baron lane as well still is really, really good. You could go for, Black Cleaver. You go for Divine Sunderer if you need to. Most of the time, you don't really want to go for Divine Sunderer on Olaf. You can maybe go for Trinity Force instead, just to get a lot more damage. Again, it's still quite good. Pantheon, same build again as before. Black Cleaver, Blades of the Ruined King. The combo with that and the second ability for Pantheon is quite good, and you'll be able to do a lot of damage, and you also have your ultimate to just rotate around the map when needed. Graves has been rising up quite a lot. Now, I can honestly move Graves up to the S tier, and I think I should really move him up to the S tier. Hullbreaker works really well with him. The new Storm Razor with the changes also works really well for him. Black Cleaver is still really good. Bloodthirster, you normally go for something like Black Cleaver, Bloodthirster into Hullbreaker, and when you split push with Graves, he can be quite disgusting, to be fair. And he's a ranged champion as well, so getting the bonus stats on a ranged champion like Graves is really, really strong. Shen, now I've put Shen in A+. He doesn't feel as strong as what maybe he could be. I think he's a lot better in competitive than solo queue. Solo queue, he just doesn't really feel that strong, and he doesn't really fit the role of a tank. And obviously with Divine Sunderer doing a lot of damage against champions like tanks like Shen, I don't think he's as good as maybe he should be. I think he might need a few little buffs. Jax, again, split push king. You can go for Divine Sunderer or Trinity Force, depending on the situation. Go for Hullbreaker. You can split push with him, and when you scale up into the late game, he just becomes an absolute beast. The next two champions are kind of falling off a little bit. Jace doesn't really benefit from any of the new items. You can still go for the same build as Jace. I think Jace is still a really strong champion, but he just hasn't benefited from any of the new items. And I think the new items are just that strong, like Hullbreaker, Divine Sunderer, and a new Death Stance, that Jace kind of falls off a little bit. Because with Jace, you still go for Black Cleaver, Manamune, Serrader's Grudge, and you go for this more lethality builds. Akali as well, again, doesn't really benefit from any of the changes. I still think Akali is quite good, but can struggle a lot in the laning phase against most of the bruisers, because she got nerfed quite a while ago with her laning phase, so she doesn't really have a lot of health anymore in the early game. So you have to play very, very passive with Akali. But if you can scale into the mid and late game, you can be really, really strong. You got two tanks in the A tier, Dr. Mundo and Malphite, which as I said, with Divine Sunderer now in the game, I think tanks have definitely fallen off a little bit. Even though Divine Sunderer champions are getting a little bit tankier, but Divine Sunderer is a great item against tanks at the same time. So that's why Malphite and Mundo for me have kind of fallen off a little bit. They're both still really good. If you need a tank for your team, Mundo's really good against magic damage, can block crowd control at the same time. Malphite's a great team fight champion if you've got champions like Rakan, Yasuo in your team, so they still can work. You still can play them. Same with Kennen as well. I think Kennen's in a bit of a weird spot, really, especially because the build with Kennen is a little bit weird. Kind of the same with Akali, but Akali works well with tier 2 items. Kennen doesn't really work too well with tier 2 items, and Kennen's build path is a little bit strange, and she doesn't really work too well. Or he, Kennen, he or she. Can't remember. Anyway, Kennen, still could be quite good during team fights, but just not that strong. Singe is just still the same. You just run around, try and do your best. Not really too sure if Singe is really a great champion. Tryndamere is an interesting one. I haven't seen a lot of Tryndamere myself yet. I haven't tried out Tryndamere myself. The same with Nasus as well. I think these two champions can definitely be better. With Tryndamere and the new Hullbreaker, it can be really good as a split push champion. And with Nasus, also with Hullbreaker and Divine Sunderer, can scale up and can be a really good champion. But the problem is that both of these champions take a long time to get online. Nasus, you need quite a few stacks. Tryndamere, you need to get a few items before you become useful. And by that point of the game, the rest of your team are probably falling really far behind, and you're not really that useful because you haven't got ahead in the early game. And Jarvan's not really that strong anymore in the Baron lane. He was strong before, that's why I made him a Baron lane build. Most of the time you go for like this poke build with Jarvan with Summon Eri, but now it's more of Conqueror, and now it's more of scaling into the late game and trying to get into team fights, because when you poke during the laner phase, it doesn't really mean that much anymore because of the second wind changes and because of some of the changes, to the items, and, champions are starting to build Grasping Undying more, and Divine Sunderer just to get a little bit more healing. And the final two champions, Teemo's just not very good, to be fair. Teemo's just Teemo, and KO is just the most useless champion in the entire game. Every time I get a KO on my team, I feel like forfeiting. Yeah, that's Barrow Lane. On to the jungle. Jungle S plus tier hasn't changed that much. I still think Lee Sin and Kha'Zix are definitely up there in A plus tier. S plus tier, sorry, not A plus, S plus tier. Both the champions are just really, really strong for separate reasons. Kha'Zix can just stealthily move around and is just a great assassin overall. It's just a pain to deal with. Lee Sin, early game, mobility, really, really insanely strong. And just one of the best blind pick champions to take in the jungle. Yeah, Kha'Zix, great assassin at the same time. Moving on to the S tier, Olaf is still a great jungle pick. I think when you compare this with a Yuumi or a Lulu, I think Olaf is probably one of the best junglers. His clear speed is still quite quick as well, even after the jungle changes. And yeah, he could just be quite a useful tank when it comes to the mid and the late game. You could just run down an AD carry, and there's not really much an AD carry can do about it. To be honest, I think Olaf, Evelynn, and Master Yi are like my 3 most banned champions, and I'll get to why Master Yi is quite low on the tier list in a second. Because I don't think Master Yi is like insanely broken. I still think he's quite counterable. But yeah, Olaf is pretty damn annoying because you could just run down an AD carry and he's just super annoying. Evelynn, still quite annoying to deal with. She didn't get really changed too much in the recent patch. If anything, she kind of got really a buff because her jungle clear is now probably quicker than most of the other AD junglers because of the smite changes. But still can get to level 5 really quickly. You can still stealth around the map. Great solo queue champion, not that strong in competitive. That's why we don't really see a lot of Evelynn in competitive, because you can kind of just counter her really, really easily. And if you just group as a team against Evelynn, there's not really much you can do. But in solo queue, teams like to split up quite a lot, but that's where Evelynn comes in handy. Fiora, still really great in the jungle. You can still clear really, really quickly with Fiora. The build of Fiora is still exactly the same as well. She still serves the exact same purpose, and she's still really, really strong in the jungle. Same with Camille as well. Same purpose in the jungle. You normally go for Trinity Force instead of Divine Sunderer in the jungle with Camille, just because you want to clear the jungle a lot quicker. So that's why Trinity Force is normally a lot better, and you're normally in team fights a lot more often as well, and you're normally roaming around the map, so getting the extra movement speed and getting the extra, you know, attack speed, attack damage and everything as well is quite helpful with Camille. But you can also go for Divine Sunder in the jungle if you want to be a little bit more tanky. Morgana, we actually saw SC7 playing Morgana in WREC, which is quite fun. It was the first game that they played. I think Morgana has one of the quickest jungle clears in the entire game at the moment. I could be wrong, because I think Master Yi is actually the quickest now since his recent buffs. But it's still a great champion to play. Like I said, you know, the jungle clear is still really, really fast. Ganking potential is still up there. He's really good if you have a hyper carry, AD carry at the same time, you know, like a Jinx, Caitlyn, someone like that. You can use a Black Shield on, and still a great champion overall. Jax is still the same. Clears the jungle quite quickly. You can go for Divine Sunder or Trinity Force, depending on the situation of the game. You can even go into split push mode when you get into the mid and late game if you want to go for Hole Breaker. Most of the time, you don't really build Hole Breaker in the jungle because you want to group with your team quite a lot. So that's why you go for other items instead. But yeah, Jax is still really, really good. Great ganking potential. Still a good champion. Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao got buffed this recent patch, I think in terms of items and also his kit, and I think Xin Zhao is probably up there as one of the best. Divine Sunderer is great for Xin Zhao because it works really well with his abilities and it allows him to be a little bit more tankier. Black Cleaver also works really well, and you've also got other items that work really, really well with Xin Zhao. His second ability and his first ability, I think it was, got buffed. I can't remember exactly what got buffed, but he did get a few buffs, and I think his jungle clear has definitely been improved, and he does a lot of damage as well now in team fights. Sometimes he struggles a little bit against other bruisers, but if you're against a lot of range carries, then Xin Zhao can be good because the ultimate, because he doesn't take any damage if an enemy hits you outside of his ulti kind of barrier in a way. Rengar still has the same one-shot potential as what he had before. The build has slightly changed. You go for more of like a lethality build now because Solari Charge Blade is not really a thing anymore on most of these like bruiser carries. But still has great one-shot potential. Again, has that invisibility that is so hard to deal with. Vi is brilliant if you need any sort of lockdown. If you're against any sort of long-range carries like Caitlyn, Ziggs, anyone like that, you can use Vi and just use her as an ulti bot in a way. Just build Guardian Angel and just lockdowns, and the rest of your team can follow up. Sometimes it can proved to be a little bit of a miscommunication, but most of the time it'll work fine. Jarvan still just, serves the same purpose in the jungle again. More to do with the early game, trying to get the flag and drag ganks off in the early game. Then Cataclysm can be quite good, but I wouldn't really recommend going for Jarvan if you're against champions that have a lot of dashes. Wukong in the jungle is still quite okay, to be fair. Not as good in my opinion as Baron Lane now. I think Baron Lane Wukong is finally superior to jungle Wukong. But jungle Wukong still serves the same purpose, and I still think jungle Wukong is completely fine. Nunu in the jungle has kind of fallen off a little bit. I still think Nunu can be very, very useful. But as mentioned already, tanks are not really in the meta at the moment because Divine Sunderer has come into the game. But Nunu is a great zoning champion. You can use the ulti to zone bruisers away from the rest of your team. Great ganking potential. Can clear quite fast and has probably the best objective control out of any other champion in the game. The Smite plus Consume combo is just really, really strong. Pantheon is still relatively okay jungler. You still have the ultimate to just gank really easily. You've got your kind of easy point and click ganking potential with Pantheon, where you can just dash onto someone and easily gank that and easily shut them down. Gragas full AP is really, really strong at the moment, especially because kind of all the other bruisers got nerfed in terms of jungle, because now when you take Smite, it's only ability damage that gets increased by 10% and not all damage, so auto attacks don't get increased by 10% for jungle camps. So Gragas can clear the jungle kind of quicker really than the other bruisers, and he does insane damage as well. If you get caught by a Gragas barrel and a Gragas combo, you're kind of dead. Graves is quite good, as mentioned already, with Black Cleaver, Bloodthirster, Storm Razor, all these items that have come into the game. And he did get a bit of a buff as well to the jungle. So his first ability now deals 150% damage to jungle monsters. Speak a little bit about Master Yi. I think Master Yi is strong, don't get me wrong. I think I could probably move him up to the A+ tier, to be totally honest with you. The only reason I haven't is because I still think Master Yi is quite easy to counter if you have a lot of crowd control. I think most of the time Master Yi gets banned anyway, but there has been some things like is Master Yi bugged? Is he not bugged? I'm not really too sure. People are saying that he's not bugged and it's intended to for the damage that he gets. Honestly, if you get in a 1v1 situation against Master Yi, just run. Just absolutely run, especially if you're AD carry. Because I remember playing against the Master Yi, my health went from 100% to 0 in a matter of seconds. So it's quite disgusting. And then these other champions are really kind of fallen off. Set doesn't really get played jungle anymore, just because he doesn't really have. He can't really clear the jungle that much faster anymore now, because you go for a more tank build. Again, it kind of delays your jungle clear speed, and there's just a lot of other junglers that are a lot better. Same with Jace. I think Jace is still actually quite an okay jungler. I just don't think as good as the other champions above. And same with Riven. I think all these champions kind of like the same purpose for me, whereas like they're really good bruisers, they can still work, but they're just not as strong as the other champions. And your bottom tier are kind of all the same. Rammus still doesn't really do too much. He's super tanky, but doesn't really offer too much. Shyvana's probably one of the worst junglers in the game. If you can get ahead, if you can get a few dragons, then yippee do, you're all good. Trendamin's not that great either. And then CT, you have Amumu and Dr. Mundo. I don't think there's much to say about them too. But again, this is just my opinion. I still think you could probably carry games if you play Rammus, Amumu, Dr. Mundo. It's not like if you see these champions on your team, then it's complete FF unless it's Kayle. Because most of the time, people don't really understand how Kayle works in the early game, and they just die like 20 times before they reach level 5. But you could probably still carry with some of these champions down in the lower tiers. And there you go, Kayle's down in C tier. Cool, move on to mid lane. Again, another really hard role to kind of, I guess, predict in a way. Or to kind of make a tier list on. I think the S+ tier champions still stay the same. Apparently Zed's bugged at the moment. Apparently his third ability doesn't work with Conqueror, or it doesn't get a stack of Conqueror. So I wouldn't really recommend playing Zed at the moment, but when that bug is fixed, I think Zed is still an S+ tier champion. With Diana as well, still up there. I still think these two assassins are the best currently in the game, but it's definitely closely followed by kind of all of the champions in S tier. I've already mentioned Irelia a little bit in the Baron lane. But Irelia is quite good at dashing around and is quite good in the early game if you can stack up your passive as quick as possible. And she's quite good against all these mages, because if the mages walk up a little bit, you land your third ability, you can jump on top of them, you can do quite a lot of damage. Katarina's still good at the same time. Again, it's really hard to play if if you're against a lot of crowd control, but if you can get heads and if you can jump around and get all the resets, then you can do quite a lot. Twisted Fate is more of a utility mid laner, more to do with using ultimate to try and get advantages around the map. But when you have the long range gold cards available, if you have other crowd control like Thresh, Alistar on your team, that could definitely help out. Doesn't do the most of the damage, but it's still quite good. Ziggs still really safe mid laner, even though they nerf Ziggs, still really strong at the moment. Super safe to play, a lot of damage, and can scale really well into the late game. Galio actually got changed a little bit. His mid lane build actually got buffed and his support build got nerfed because the base damage of his ultimate went down, but the AP ratio went up. So now if you build Galio with more AP, your ultimate's going to deal more damage. And if you get a Camille Galio combo, you can do quite a lot of damage to the carry in the Hextech Ultimatum. Yasuo got a quite good buff. I still think the Yasuo build is kind of the same with Solari Charge Blade, Blade Rune King, and Infinity Edge, because Solari Charge Blade kind of is only really good when you're above 75% crit rate, but when you build Solari Charge Blade plus Infinity Edge, you're going to get that 100% crit rate. So Solari Charge Blade still works really well. Also, his tornado speed now is completely disgusting. It's really, really hard to dodge now. I've tried to dodge it, various amount of times, but it's really, really hard to dodge. So I think the buff to Yasuo has definitely been quite handy for him. Karma, I think, is actually a really insane champion. I think her damage output on her thirst ability is disgusting. The amount of shielding that she can offer, the crowd control that she has as well with her second ability and her ultimate is just absolutely disgusting. That's why I put her in the S tier. And to be honest, in the duo lane as well, she probably deserves to be in like the A+ and S tier. Even though I don't think I put her in the duo lane. Ahri's still a great pick champion, great roaming champion as well. Still does a lot of damage. Again, not really much has changed with mid lane champions. You know, Orianna is still the same. It's still really, really good. Gragas the same with jungle. You go for a full AP build. You do a lot of damage. You have a lot of sustain and lane phase. The same with Baron lane Gragas. I think mid lane Akali is probably better than Baron lane Akali, just because you're not really going to get punished by any of the mages if you're against a mage. So say, for example, you're against like an Ahri, Orianna, Katarina, Twisted Fate, Ziggs, one of these champions, you're not really going to get as punished as much as an Akali. You just have to play safe, because most of the time you're going to be against a range matchup. But when you're trying to walk up, or when you're trying to get CS against bruisers, then they can look to jump on top of you, do quite a lot of damage. Lucian, Akshan, and Corki in the mid lane, kind of the three marksmen in the mid lane. I still think they all work completely fine. Akshan probably gets slightly better in the mid lane. I think his build is quite decent at the moment, because you can go for like Blade Rune King, Storm Razor, Wit's End, items like that. I think Storm Razor works really, really well on Akshan. We've seen a little bit of Corki mid. We haven't seen any Lucian mid just yet. I'll probably try these two champions in mid lane. Corki build is quite interesting. You go for like this full crit build now with Solari Charge Blade at the end. And kind of the same with Lucian as well, because Lucian and Corki kind of lost a lot with Solari Charge Blade kind of being changed, because you don't get the extra 25% crit. But Solari Charge Blade still works fine with both the champions, because you're still using abilities quite a lot. Morgana in the mid lane, a lot of wave clear, a lot of damage potential, a lot of crowd control, still quite good. Fizz, I think, is bugged at the moment as well. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure I remember a situation where I was running away from Fizz, and I think someone actually said this to me. If you're running away from Fizz, then Fizz's ultimate, Chum the Waters, actually never lands on you, even though the Fizz ulti, it kind of like hits a brick wall, and then it just stops in front of you, but it never actually lands on you. So I'm not too sure if that's actually a bug, but I'm not too sure. But anyway, still think Fizz is a fine champion. Not as strong as the other champions because of the recent nerfs, but yeah, still quite good. And Jace as well, again, kind of fallen off because of the kind of the meta changes. He doesn't really benefit from any of the new items. Renekton mid lane, kind of the same purpose as Baron lane, you know, with Blade Rune King, Black Cleaver. You can look to try and play aggressive in the early game, kind of the same with Irelia in a way. If you can get to level 3 and play quite aggressive, he can be really good. Aurelian's Soul, not really too strong at the moment, kind of struggles because of the build path, and because Rylai's Liandry's is not really a strong build path at the moment. You kind of go for like this full AP build, but sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle with Aurelian's Soul to to kind of one-shot someone, especially because there's a lot of healing and shielding in the game at the moment. Brand, I think, is better as a duo laner than a mid laner. I think Brand struggles a lot against most mid laners, especially bruisers and champions that can jump on top of you. Whereas in the duo lane, you have a support there to protect you, which means that Brand's duo lane is probably a little bit better. But you still do quite well in team fights. You know, you can spread quite a lot of damage, and you can do really, really well. And then Veigar is kind of in a rough spot at the moment. You just take way too long to scale. And even when you scale up into the mid and late game, you just don't do enough damage to one-shot anyone. And it can be a bit difficult to one-shot everyone. Whereas, like I said, when there's lots of heals and shielding in the game at the moment. You got 3 champions down here, Seraphine, Lux, and Annie. All these champions are very unique picks and very kind of pocket picks in a way. Especially Lux and Annie. I think the only time I've really seen these champions is when there's like kind of one tricks on your team. I don't think the champions are very strong, to be honest with you. Annie doesn't really have a lot of one-shot potential anymore, and Tibbers kind of sucks. Lux, if you're good with her, if you can land a binding and land a combo, then she can be really good. Same with Seraphine as well. If you can land roots and ultimates, it can be really good, but they both are quite hard to play. And then KO is just KO. Right, onto the AD carry role we go. Right, Varus and Kha'Zix. I still think both these champions are S+ tier. I think Varus, with his poke build, is still insanely strong. Nothing's changed for him at all, really. Ghostblade got nerfed a little bit, but honestly, it doesn't really mean too much. Varus is still insanely strong. Kha'Zix, you don't really go for Solari Chargeblade on her anymore. You more go towards Runa's Hurricane. I'll probably do a video kind of explaining why Solari Chargeblade is not that good on Kha'Zix anymore. It's kind of self-explanatory. You don't get the extra 50% crit, and also you don't really get any extra crit anyway from Kha'Zix in the first place. So yeah, Kha'Zix still really good with the Runa's Hurricane build, with kind of yon hit build, with Blade Rune King still really strong. On to S tier. S tier has changed a lot. Xayah still up there as one of the best AD carries. Could probably move up into S+ tier. Probably the best user of the Solari Chargeblade. Not Solari Chargeblade. The Storm Razor plus Infinity Edge combo. And then on top of that, you can go for like Mortal Reminder, Static Shiv, then Bloodthirster. Really, really insane build for really insane build that you can go with Xayah. And I think she definitely is up there as one of the safest and one of the best AD carries to play. Speaking of safest AD carries to play, Caitlyn is another great champion that you can use the Storm Razor Infinity Edge combo on. And you can see that most of these champions that I've moved up in the tier list benefit a lot from this Chargeblade, Storm Razor plus Infinity Edge combo, or champions that benefit the most from Storm Razor. Caitlyn, super safe in the laning phase. You can play really aggressive in the laning phase if you want to as well. One of the safest champions to play. Has a lot of range, the highest base attack range out of all other AD carries. Works great with Enchanter supports at the same time, so it's really, really strong. Again, Jinx, Storm Razor plus Infinity Edge, insanely strong with her at the moment. And with an Enchanter support, Jinx Lulu is kind of back in a way. You can say you can go for like Jinx Karma as well, which is also very strong. Jinx Yumi also works really, really well. And if you can get a few early game kills, or if you can get a few items, you kind of go for a more single target Jinx build now with Storm Razor, Infinity Edge, and Static Shiv. And then if you get the resets on your ultimate, or on your passive, then you can just run around and just get a lot of attack speed and do a lot of damage. My beloved Jhin has finally moved up. Jhin is finally fun to play again, I have to admit. Jhin, Storm Razor, Infinity Edge, Mortal Reminder, Rapid Fire Cannon, Static Shiv. Insane damage. I think Jhin is really, really fun to play right now. I think he's still very high risk, high reward because of the reload mechanic, and because he can be put in, few difficult situations sometimes. But my god, his damage output is incredible. I love playing Jhin at the moment. He's one of my most played already this season with Caitlyn. Yeah, just insane. I love that Jin's back in the meta. I love that Storm Razor has just become a thing now where Jhin is really, really popular again. And yeah, it's just nice to see that Jhin is finally up in S tier. Lucian I still think is quite good. Even though Solari Chargeblade has nerfed him a little bit, I still think he works really well with Storm Razor plus Infinity Edge. And I still think as a champion overall, he's a great solo queue carry, because he has a lot of self-peel with all of his dashes, and you can go for this more Hunter, you can go for like Hunter Genius to get more ability haste with the likes of Serrade's Grudge and other items as well, which is really, really good for Lucian, so I still think he's up there. Interesting enough, Vayne and Draven for me are still in the A+ tier. I honestly think that Vayne might have gotten a little bit weaker because of Solari Charge Blade changes. Stormrazor, I think, can work quite well on her, and kind of the same with Draven in a way. I think that Draven and Vayne have lost a little bit of damage because of the Solari Charge Blade changes. And again, the same situation as what I always say with champions like Vayne and Draven is that they're really, really hard to play for kind of separate reasons. You know, Vayne's early game is one of the weakest early games in the game right now. And can't really do too much in lane phase because of her short range, because she doesn't really have a lot of damage. But if you can scale up into the late game, if you get a few items under your belt, she can be one of the strongest for sure. And Draven kind of the opposite. Draven is one of the strongest early game champions, but he's very, very hard to play because you need to understand his dropping axe mechanics. But again, Draven works quite well with Stormrazor. So does Vayne. But I think both of these champions now, Solari Charge Blade is not really meta. And that you don't really get the extra 50% crit, so you can't, you know, Vayne's build's a little bit weird now. It's like Blade Run King, Stormrazor, Phantom Dancer, Wit's End, which is a little bit weird. You don't get as much crit as before. But Draven's build's, you know, still quite fine. Infinity Edge, Bloodthirster is still the same. Instead of going Solari Charge Blade, you can go for Stormrazor and then Mortal Reminder, so I still think his build is quite okay. Ezreal's definitely fallen down for me. You know, Ezreal can't use Stormrazor at all. I think Ezreal is definitely in a bit of a tough spot because, you know, by the time that Ezreal gets Manamune and Trinity Force, most of the time Manamune won't even be completed, and Trinity Force is also super expensive. By the time you get them 2 items, you know, the champions in the S tier, for example, probably already have 2.5, 3 items, but just because of how much more expensive Ezreal's items are and how long he takes to scale. And again, I don't think he doesn't do as much damage output as the other AD carries. Tristana, the reason why I haven't moved Tristana up into the S tier is kind of the same reason for Vayne and Draven. Tristana just doesn't really feel, okay, it's not really the same situation, but she doesn't really feel that good in Wild Rift. I think the way her mechanics work with her third ability, and the way you have to try and auto-attack the same champion over and over again, it's really easy to do in PC League because obviously it's point and click, it's a lot more accurate, but it's extremely hard to do in Wild Rift, and I think Tristana is a very, very hard champion to play in Wild Rift. If you're just auto-attacking normally, I don't think she's that good of a champion. If you can use your third ability, if you can get your resets on your second ability, and do a lot of damage with your bombs and your auto attacks, then she can be really, really strong. But it's just being able to put the bomb on the right target and auto attack that same target so your bomb does more damage, which is a really, really hard part. Corki has fallen off a little bit as well. As mentioned, you know, the Solari Charge Blade changes has kind of hurt him quite a bit. You can't really go for Manamune plus Solari Charge Blade anymore because you don't get the extra 25% crit. And you kind of need more items for Solari Charge Blade to be useful on the likes of Corki and Lucian. So now Corki's build is like Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge, you know, items like that. Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge. Trying to think what the other item is. I can't remember off the top of my head. You can go for Solari Charge Blade if you want to as well. Void Staff, and there's another crit item I've completely forgot. I'm going to go onto the build because I've completely forgot what the other item is. Oh, Stormrazor, of course, yeah. So you can go for like this build with Manamune into Stormrazor, which I've seen before, but I think Essence Reaver, Stormrazor, Infinity Edge is quite good. That means that when you get Solari Charge Blade, you can get 100% crit with Void Staff. So yeah. By the way, all the updates are done on the website in terms of builds, so if you want to check it out, you can do. In the A tier, we have kind of all the AP mages that have kind of really fallen off, in my opinion. I think all these AP mages have all fallen off just because of how strong Stormrazor is and because champions like Jhin, Jinx, and Caitlyn are in the meta, which can do really, really well against mages because of their long range and because of their strong early game presence in the lane, which means that these AP champions don't really have a free lane anymore to scale up when it gets to the mid and late game, and they can struggle quite a bit. But I still think Ziggs and Orianna are definitely better than Seraphine and Morgana. Ziggs and Orianna still do really, really well in the dual lane. Seraphine and Morgana not so much, but yeah. Akshan again in the dual lane. As I always say, I think Akshan is a better mid laner than dual laner. He can't really play aggressive in the laning phase like he wants to try and proc his passive, because it can be quite hard against, you know, any sort of crowd control supports. And he doesn't really do like the best damage output. And as I said, I think he's a lot better solo laner, so he can roam around the map. He can use his passive to his benefit, and he can poke quite a lot in lane. But in the dual lane, you can't really do that. Asher's again, you know, not really too strong. Doesn't really benefit a lot from any of the changes. The same with Miss Fortune as well. Asher and Miss Fortune don't really benefit from the Storm Razor changes, so they're definitely falling down for me. Miss Fortune, you can go, you can still go for like a lethality build if you want to, which can be quite strong. Ash again, you can kind of go for this man immune sort of on hit build if you want to. Not on hit, sorry, man immune into crit if you really want to, or you can go for the on hit with like Blade Ring King, Rune Hurricane. But again, it's just not as strong as these Storm Razor champions. And then Brand and Veigar are just worse AP versions of the above, pretty much. And then Senna, you don't really want to play her as an AD carry. You don't want to play her as a farming AD carry. You more want to play her as fasting Senna, which means that you have like an AP mage or someone down in the dual lane with you, like a Galio, Gragas, or someone like that. And Senna just tries to stack as many souls as possible so she doesn't get the farm. But obviously in the solo queue, people don't really understand that. On to support, the final one. We're out at 35 minutes. I'll try and get through this as quick as possible. On to support. Rakan's still really strong with Thresh and Yuumi. All these champions still stay S+ tier, in my opinion. Rakan insanely strong. You go for electrocute build into full damage. You can go for aftershock if you want to be a little bit more tanky. Great team fight presence. Really great with Zyra as well, which is a really strong AD carry at the moment. And yeah, just overall a really, really strong champion to pick up. Thresh, probably one of the best solo queue champions to play in the support role. With his lantern, he can get the allies to safety. You know, you have his hook, his flay, his box. So in team fights, he's really strong. In a lane phase, he's really strong at the same time. And he can be really, really good. Yuumi is still Yuumi. It can be hard sometimes to play Yuumi in a solo queue because you have to rely so much on your team. But if you have a duo queue, if you have a trio queue, then Yuumi's probably the best support in the game because you can just jump on someone that you rely on and they can do quite a lot of damage. You can heal them and shield them. And Lulu's healing and shielding now is a lot better than what it was before. So for me, she still stays up in the S+ tier. And Karma as well, up in the S+ tier. Keys and Trottles loves Karma support, and I completely agree with them. I think Karma support is great. I think the shielding that she offers is just way too strong. And like I said, I think it's just all of her crowd control at the same time. She still does a lot of damage with her first ability, even when you build support. She has a lot of crowd control with her second ability and her ultimate, a lot of shielding, a lot of healing. She's just absolutely disgusting overall. And the reason why Yuumi, and now that Yuumi and Karma are up here, has kind of dropped Nami and Lulu for me. I don't think Nami and Lulu is as strong as Yuumi and Karma. Obviously with Janna as well. I still think they could both work really well. You know, if you compare Lulu with Enchanter support, with hyper carries like Jinx, like Xayah, like Caitlyn, they can still be really, really strong. Nami still does quite well in the lane phase. It has a lot of lane presence and is really, really good during team fights. And Janna's more of like a disengaged support. She doesn't really offer too much in terms of engaging or, you know, helping your team out in that sense. But if you're against a lot of assassins and a lot of bruisers, and if you need to peel your AD carry, then Janna can be a great pick. And Alistar's up here as well. Alistar's definitely moved up quite a bit. He's definitely becoming a really strong tank support again, and kind of just works as, I talk about it a lot, but like kind of ease of access engage, or like easy engage champions that that I talk about. You know, if you land your headbutt pulverize, it's an easy engage. It can be followed up by your team at the same time. He's really tanky frontline champion. Can struggle a little bit in the lane phase, I must admit, against champions like Karma, Lulu, Nami, and Janna, because, you know, you're only melee at level 1, so you can struggle a little bit. But as long as you play safe in the lane phase and you get to level 2 or 3, you can look to try and engage after that. But yeah, when you get to level 5, you can be really, really tanky and you can be really helpful during team fights. Next champions, we're going to talk about Morgana down in the support role. Most of the time with Morgana, you kind of want to build full AP in a way, which can be helpful, but at the same time, sometimes can't be helpful. But I think Black Shield is just such a strong ability. I think Morgana Caitlyn is one of the strongest dual lane combos in the game right now. Just because you can use a Black Shield on Caitlyn, and she has a lot of range in the first place, but now she can't get crowd control, which is pretty insane. And if you land your dart binding with Morgana, you can follow that with the Caitlyn trap and do quite a lot of damage, or the net as well, or even Caitlyn's first ability. So I think the poking, the lane pressure of Morgana is definitely up there. Leona and Galio still two great engage supports. Both are different, you know, situations. Even though Galio did get a little bit of a base damage nerf on his ultimate, I still think he's insanely strong. Leona is still really, really strong, more for single target damage. Again, can kind of struggle against Enchanter supports because she's a melee champion. The same with Galio. But during team fights, they can be really, really strong. You know, Leone, if you can catch an enemy off guard, is great. Galio during the team fights can also be really good and give you that magic shield if you need it. Brom is still a really, really good peel support. You know, can still block quite a lot of damage. You still have the passive as well, which can work quite well with hyper carry supports because you're going to go for a lot of attack speeds with the Storm Razor build. And the slow from Storm Razor as well also helps Brom because that means that the champion will be slowed, which means that Brom can walk up and try and auto attack and stack its passive, which could be quite good. Senna is okay, kind of meh. I want to play Senna actually because I want to try the new build out on her. Let me quickly show you. Kind of this build now, not the duo build, this build. Black Cleaver, Divine Sunder, Rapid Fire Cannon. Divine Sunder works quite well with Senna, so I want to try this build out. So I definitely will be playing Senna very, very soon. And then Sona and Seraphine are just, you know, just worse versions really of an Enchanter support. Sona could do really, really well, honestly. If you can scale into the mid and late game, you just have to play very, very passive during the laning phase. So that means you're going to give up a lot of pressure in the duo lane. But if you can scale up into mid and late game, get a few items, you can be really, really strong support. Get a lot of heals, a lot of shielding, a lot of movement speed at the same time. Seraphine, if you can land your ultimate, if you could be, you know, useful in that sense, she can be really, really good. And if you can poke and get a lot of laning pressure in the laning phase, she can be good. But again, most of the time, it can be quite difficult to play her. Moving on to B tier, no one really plays set support anymore. I think only in certain situations. I think set support is a really good counter against Rakan because you can use set ultimate when Rakan's about to ulti. You can kind of use it as a disengage in that sense. But most of the time, set support doesn't really get played right now. Kind of same with the Amumu and Blitzcrank. Again, two very different supports that don't really work too well. You know, Amumu doesn't really offer too much. Can work as a cool combo. You know, me and Kha'Zix made it work before, but it's just a very unique champion to pick. And again, Blitzcrank, if you can't land your hook, then you're kind of useless. But Blitzcrank did get quite a good buff with the movement speed, so maybe he can move a little bit up in the tier list. But I haven't seen him yet on the new patch. Actually, I played against him, and his movement speed is quite disgusting. So maybe he can move up a little bit. Who knows? Maybe he's actually a good champion now. Lux doesn't really get played as support anymore. You mainly build Lux as 4 AP. Isn't really good. And Soraka is just Soraka. Gets countered by one item that costs 1,000 gold. Whether you're AD or AP damage, and then all your healing gets reduced. It can still work quite well. Especially in low elo. And that's everything. That is my tier list for patch 3.1. I think there's a lot of champions in the meta at the moment. I think the meta is in quite a good state. Unless someone finds something that is completely broken at the moment. I think the meta is, you know, in a really, really good state. I don't think there's any broken champions that are currently terrorizing the entire meta, which is quite nice to see. Nice to see that AD carries are coming back with Storm Razor. Nice to see some more champions and more champion builds now in the Baron lane with Divine Sunder and Death Stance. And yeah, overall, I'm just really enjoying the game for patch 3.1. But yeah, as always, thank you all for tuning into the video. Again, if you have any feedback, let me know down in the comments. Let me know if you would change anything about the tier list. I'm always open to feedback. For those of you who don't know, this is Wild Rift Fire. This is the website that I work on. If you want to go onto the website, I will leave a link down in the description. You got champion builds for every single champion in the game. So say, for example, you want to look at I don't know, the new Tristana build, which I will be playing Tristana soon. You can see updated build there with all of the build breakdown and everything there. So you can definitely give that a try. But yeah, as always, thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you all in the next Wild Rift video. Stay safe. I'll see you all very soon. Peace.